Hello everyone, welcome to part 3 of the logo inlay project. In part 1 we did the CAD, in part 2 we did the CAM, and in this part we're actually going to do some cutting, and that's why I am in front of the CNC router. So what I'd like to do in this video is start out with the setup on how we're going to place the material on the actual router, and then we'll get to making some chips. So let's take a closer look. So here is the aluminum stock that I will be using for the, I guess the frame, if you will. This is 3/4 inch thick, 60/61. It's about 17 inches by 10 inches. And this side I just cut with the bandsaw just to cut it down to size. Now what we need to do, and what you saw from the CAM video, is we need to do a contour along the whole outside of this. We need to cut on the inside, and we need to face this off. So for work holding, that gets a little tricky or a little bit challenging. I can't just clamp this from the top because I need to go around the outside. I can't really bolt it down easily because of various reasons. So what I've come up with is I have this piece of MDF that is larger, that is clamped down to my aluminum bed down here up front, and then we're just going to use the good old tape method. You take painter's tape, apply it on the bottom of the part, apply it on the bed, which is the MDF here, and then use a thin layer of super glue in between them, and that will hold this in place so that we can get to all sides of it. Now, if I had a vacuum table, I would probably use a vacuum table instead. I think that would be probably the ultimate way of holding this. Some people might ask, why am I using the aluminum bed with MDF on top and then this on top of that when I could just scooch back a little bit and use the bed back here, which is already MDF? Well, two reasons. The bed up here is more rigid, the aluminum is just a lot more rigid, and I am going to be doing a contour. I'm going to be cutting down a fair amount to go around the outside. I realize that that's a spoil board, but that will cut into the bed surface, so I'm just going to be using this instead. So this is the work holding for the aluminum. Let's look at the work holding for the wood. So here we are on the other end of the table, and I've got my vise set up and mounted in place, and so I'm going to be using the vise for all the wood pieces. Here is an example cut that I did, so it's going to sit in the vise like that, nice and simple. What I'm going to do is, if you remember back from the CAM video, all of the parts are going to be indicated on this top left corner. There's 3 pieces, the hair, the glasses, and the beard, and each one of these is a slightly different size, but this back jaw is fixed, and the left-hand side, I'm just going to indicate exactly 2 inches from the edge of the vise. So whenever I put a piece of wood in here, it's always going to be 2 inches off and against this surface. So all I have to do is open the vise up like that, pull out the piece, put in a new piece of stock, make sure it's 2 inches away, close it up, and then I am good to go. So this should be very repeatable and very easy. And as you can see here, I'm only cutting down a little bit. I am leaving this lip on the bottom, and this is the parts that's going to be pressed into the aluminum piece, and then all of this is going to be faced off later. So really the only thing we care about right here is that we get a good surface finish along this edge. This can be all broken up and who cares? This is going to be at the bottom, and then this is going to be the only thing that's really going to be visible, so we don't really even care about this at all. So that's going to be the setup for all the wood pieces, and this is going to be significantly more straightforward. So let's start by cutting the aluminum piece. This painter's tape hold down method is relatively straightforward. You just need to make sure that all of the surfaces are clean and that you can get the tape to adhere to it properly. With MDF, that's not that big of a deal. Just make sure you kind of get the dust off of it. And on the bottom of the aluminum, I'm just cleaning it and making sure that there's no, visible burrs or anything like that. And then just making sure that you really press the tape in there to get a really good seal, and then just adding some super glue. It's relatively straightforward. I'm using the edge finder that I purchased with the Avid CNC router to find the lower bottom edge, but I am indicating the Z in the middle of the workpiece. I'm not guaranteeing that this piece is perfectly flat, so it's usually a good idea to measure it in the center of mass. When you saw me tape this earlier, I didn't show you that I had already kind of laid this out and made sure that the coordinates were in the right spot, so that I was cutting all the way around the outside of this and that it was actually, I guess, parallel with the gantry. I made sure and did that ahead of time. Although, since it is mounted to the MDF, I could very easily unclamp the MDF and adjust that if needed. But I did run the bit around just to make sure it matched up with what my cam actually said. I'm not going to go into too much detail into each and every single little cut here. I am starting with the beard, and if you're interested in the cam, I do have a previous video, which is part 2, which is the whole cam of this project. So you can check out that video if you're kind of interested in all the tool paths and everything. But I started with the beard. I'm just using an adaptive tool path to clear everything out, then coming back in with a contour, then coming back in with the 1/8 inch end mill to clean up the little bits. So the longest cut is done, and the finish isn't fantastic. It looks a lot worse than it is. I was expecting to feel this and just be terrible, but it's actually relatively smooth. Even on some of these parts, it's just kind of maybe a little bit rough, and in a couple spots there's definitely some chatter. The good news is this doesn't need to really have a good finish to it. The only thing that needs a good finish are these edges, and we're going to come back in and contour those separately, so that is really not that big of a deal. I was hoping for a little bit better surface finish than this, but I'm just kind of all about material removal right now, and that's what I did. So this is, it's fine. So now let's go move on to the contour. And when I say, let's cut the contour, what I really mean is, let's skip that part and go directly to cutting the glasses. I apparently did not record this portion, but don't worry, I will show cutting a contour some point during this video. But here is what it looks like cutting the glasses. Using the same settings as the beard, this was pretty straightforward. So that was actually a much better cut. It sounded a lot better, and the edge finish is a lot nicer. The floor is still meh, but I forgot to say the single flute end mill really never has that great of a floor finish. If I wanted a better floor finish, I would go to a traditional 2 flute like that. But that looks a lot better, sounds a lot better. All I did is increase the RPM and slow the feed rate, and it was a lot better. So let's do the hair. The footage for cutting the hair looks suspiciously similar as the cutting for the glasses and the beard, so I'm leaving it out. But here is the contour that I promised you. Pretty simple, just going over all of this with a simple contour command, just to clean up the walls of everything. So now I have the whole inside done, and the wall finish is not too bad. Maybe you can kind of see a little bit of the reflection there. It's pretty decent. It'll be perfectly fine for the wood. So yeah, all of this is done. Now we just got to do the outside and then move on to the wood. If you watched my cam video, you know that I'm just using an adaptive tool path to just kind of clean up all the material around the outside, and then a final contour to just go and clean up that edge. And this is what it looks like when it's cutting. I realize that there's a few people who are going to point out that I could have just used a slotting command and just, cut out the outside and been done with it. Well, there's a lot of challenges to that. This is 3/4 inch deep, and I'm cutting actually a little bit deeper than that, so maybe, call it 0.8 depth of cut. Slotting that would be an absolute nightmare. In addition to that, the frame, the outside piece that you would be freeing up would be somewhat loose. I guess you could use tabs. It just really wasn't worth it for me to try doing this as a slotting command. I will try slotting on a future video with something a lot thinner, but at 3/4 of an inch deep, I decided to just go with an adaptive toolpath and just simply remove the material. It really didn't take that long. So, the outside is done. I just need to do the final contour and clean all of this up, and we're done with the aluminum. However, I made a really nice rookie mistake. This was the single flute end mill I was using for the outside. This does not have a long enough depth of cut to do this pass. So what happened, you might be able to see there's some chip weld along here. When it was coming along, the chip started kind of welding against the shank, started rubbing, and now I have a couple of these marks here, there, and there. That also caused it to lose some positioning, and you see there's a mark down here. It started to kind of gouge in a little bit, so nice rookie mistake. So what I did to correct that is there's just a couple flat marks on here. There's a flat mark in the bridge of the glasses and a flat mark over here on the side. I used these points to indicate off of because I know what they're at in SolidWorks. So I basically just took the new end mill, touched off of that, reset those coordinates to what they needed to be, then reran the program, and it's not too terrible. It's off just by a tiny, tiny bit. So now I'm going to go through and contour this, and I'm just going to bring it in just a little bit, maybe 1/10,000th of an inch. I'll just do a negative stock to leave, bring this whole thing in a little bit, and I'll be fine. So the outer contour is done, and I'm reasonably happy with the edge finish. If you look at that, it's pretty decent. It's not too bad. I can sand that up real nice. So this is done for now. I'm gonna move on to the wood pieces. Now it's time to cut the wood pieces up. I have the glasses, the hair, and the beard as 3 separate pieces. I'm trying to actually pick interesting parts of the wood. I don't want to necessarily make this really easy on myself and avoid the knots and avoid some of the figuring and burl sections. I actually want to use those. I want to try and see how I can incorporate those into the design. So for each one of the pieces, I'm trying to select the wood that I feel will be most visually interesting for those parts. So I have all my wood cut to size, and really I just need to make sure that this and this surface are parallel. Everything else doesn't really matter. I've got the beard piece mounted in here. I have up labels on all of these, so up, up, and up, just to make sure I cut the right part. And then this is exactly 2 inches from the side, and I have my caliper set to that. So if I need to remove this and test the fit and put it back on, I can very easily put it back on without it shifting at all. I just need to make sure I don't clamp it too tight in the vise because that will compress it this way. So anyway, I think we are ready to start cutting. I'm gonna start with the beard. Wood cuts so much easier than the aluminum does. I mean, it is just so much faster and so much more consistent. The setup for these is pretty simple. Adaptive tool path just to kind of clear out the material from the outside, then a contour. That's all using a 1/4" end mill. Then I come back with an 1/8" end mill and just clean up the little pockets, the little radiuses, and that is all there is to it. Each one of these only takes about 5 minutes, something like that. So pretty straightforward and pretty quick. So once the first part was done, I need to do a test fit against the aluminum. Most likely I will need to adjust this a little bit, but I'm just testing it here to see what the fit looks like. Then I can go back, do another contour pass that just cuts it in just a little bit, do another test fit, rinse and repeat until it fits the way I want, and then I can use those same settings on all the future parts. So this is definitely going to need some shaved off. It's hard to even just kind of fit into the groove. So I think I'm going to start with 2/1000 and then go from there. So I ended up at 2.5 thousandths of an inch negative offset, and that seems to work out okay. I really want this thing very, very tight. I'm going to use a dead blow hammer to get all of these in there. No glue, it's just going to be a really tight press fit. So now that I know that 2.5 thou is the way to go, I can just go ahead and cut all the others with those same settings. So I think that is it for the part making. This looks like it turned out really good. There was a lot of knots and fun stuff in here, but looks like it cut just fine. And I was really looking forward to this one because it's just such a cool looking part. So yeah, that is it for cutting. Let's go over to all the pieces. So here are all the final pieces. So everything is made. Hooray, that's pretty cool. A couple little notes here. This wood, I didn't talk about this earlier, this wood has been actually sitting out in my shop for at least 3 years now. The previous tenants actually left it, and it was probably sitting in here for 5 years before that. It is very dry, so I really don't expect it to move much, but I'm not a woodworker, so I don't really know what's exactly going to happen, but this should give you an idea of the fit that I am after. I'm basically doing like a bearing fit that you would with bearings. So there you go. It takes a little bit of force. A rubber mallet can get this in, and it shouldn't be going anywhere. Okay, I'm going to need a crowbar to get that out now, but it is a very, very tight fit, and that's what I'm after. I don't really expect this to move a lot because it is extremely dry, but we'll see. Another note about the glasses, I actually did have to go back through and recut these a second time. That's why you see a little bit of this dig-in pattern over here. When I put them back on the vise, because these aren't perfectly flat, it just dug in a little bit more. These, for some reason, were a little bit tight. It might just be the nature of this wood is maybe a little bit harder, and I had to go back and recut it, but now, you know, they pretty much fit like all the others. So this is what it ends up looking like. So the next steps are going to be to press these into place. I'm going to face this whole thing off with the aluminum, sand it all up, oil it, wax it, and that is the end of it. That is going to be for a future video. I'm going to stop this video right here. So thanks for watching. Be sure to check out the fourth and final piece of the installment of this logo inlay project. And as always, thanks for watching. Check me out on Facebook for any updates to my channel, and see you next time. Hey buddy, you should subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so. Ha 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 ha.